You're watching Just Picture It, and I'm Eileen Fung. Our guest today is Eileen Clegg. She's the founder of Visual Insight and has been doing room-sized live murals for some of the top organizations that are changing the world we live in. IBM, the Gates Foundation, the Future of Talent, and others in the not-for-profit and government sectors. Welcome, Eileen.
Thank you so much for having me, Maylin.
So glad to have you.
Thank you.
So, what's this all about?
Well, as you know from our work together, over the years we've worked on many projects.
Yes.
And we've seen how, especially on the with Doug Engelbart project and the big mural, that we would see people so much able to exchange ideas in a different way when they were gathered around a mural rather than just talking.
Well, that's what brought us together. Remember when you and Valerie Landau and I got together and we said, let's celebrate the mother of all demos. And then you said, I want to create a big mural, and it was 28 feet. And we used it in the program for the future. We had 300 people and 4,000 people watching online. And I saw an amazing thing happen, which was groups of many different people just come together and relate in ways that I'd never seen before. Wow. This is sort of communicating in groups.
Well, so you've experienced it, and I really appreciate that we have a chance to talk a little more deeply, and which I've been studying about as I've been studying more about Jungian psychology and sort of what happens when people work with visuals and work together. So the chance to talk about it is really welcome to me. And we're going to talk about 3 different reasons why visuals work so well for people in groups. But let's start with the first one, which is when we were all gathered around the big timeline of the history of technology, people were so excited, and people who may have had different ideas, like we were talking about, we're in the conceptual age, and that means that we are very much in our heads and very much in having different thoughts from one another. So the murals help people be able to be in the same space without words, exploring new ideas.
Well, there's another factor, which is in the past we were limited to paper and pencil and what we could draw in front of us. Whereas now, if you do a mural, we can actually digitize it, put it online, and lots of people can explore it. So we have new ways of communicating with each other that involve like the old cave painting, but now the cave painting can be seen around the world.
We're starting to really be able to scale this. And it started in the room, and what we've talked about, you and I, a lot, is what happens when you have a group of people, they've gotten together and they're talking about an idea, and they think, like we're saying, there are many possible meanings for each word. Everybody has a different picture in their head. Our example here is they're saying, we need an information architecture. Well, one person's picturing a building, one person's picturing a spreadsheet, one person's picturing a scroll, somebody else sees a global brain, and somebody else sees, you know, everybody has a different picture. Have you ever seen a group of people get together and try to, like, write a mission statement?
Oh, yeah. All over the map. And they think they're talking about the same thing, but it's completely different.
And like it's a the, no, and they'll just go on and on. And then when we walk in the room, like we did with a big wave or a big spiral, suddenly the words don't matter. People feel what they're all gathering around in their focus. And they're able to talk in a more free way, in a more transparent to one another. And it's less threatening because words kind of close down an idea, whereas images free them, as we say. So the idea of the big pictures is, again, you've got this image that people feel, they're able to talk and be open about it. And what we're discovering now is that the very deep kind of context that people are assuming, there's no way to have that in the room, but visually we're actually creating a context for the ideas. So people all are picturing the same thing. And,
you know, as somebody who has come to the United States as an immigrant, I see that a lot because I grew up in a different country. And when people talk here, it's all taken for granted. Oh, we all mean the same thing. But I know they don't because I don't. And I know somebody who's grown up in Africa doesn't mean the same thing as somebody who's grown up in Asia like me. So I've always known this, but it was only when the visuals came about and allowed people to see that the context could be completely different for different people, but we could still talk about something together.
Yes.
The power of the art took us beyond words. We've been almost trapped in our words about our cultural assumptions, and somehow it frees us up.
I think it is a sense of freedom, and it's a shared language, an international language, an ancient language. And in fact, you know, because you've met Bonnie DeVarco and you know about our research into what we call the shape of thought. And the idea is that we really do sort of have a morphology about ideas that crosses cultures. So you're right, suddenly people from many cultures are sitting in a room and kind of in the same shared mind space.
So there's a way in which the globalization and the reach of the technology, some people call the internet allowing us to have a global brain, that is allowing the power of visuals to come back in to help us understand each other, where we actually haven't been able to do that using the traditional paper and pencil. We've allowed words to shape our thoughts.
Yes.
And now we're breaking out of that cage.
Yes, we're going back to move forward. Yeah. It's only been like a few hundred years where visual has not been so much part of daily life. This is part of our human history.
Back to the future. Because our brains for thousands of years have been communicating in groups with people around pictures, looking at landscapes, looking at cave paintings, drawing things on the sand. This is what our brains are wired to do. So it's wonderful for you to have done this deep exploration, but I understand you're also actually taking a master's course about this. Tell us about that.
Well, the reason for that is I've been doing this, as you know, for 10 years, having the front row seat to so many exciting, innovative leaders in our world, and seeing them be able to gather around the visuals and feeling a little bit perplexed, like, why is this so profound? And are there ways that we could even improve the tool? So I decided I wanted to learn a little bit more about not just cognition, but also what our friend, yours and my friend, Betsy Burroughs calls the Milky Way brain.
Oh, yes.
The Milky Way brain. So this is our spiral outside. So we'll get back to your question by taking the long way around. But if you think of the size of your prefrontal cortex as about 1 meter, the rest of the brain is the size of the Milky Way. So that's this idea that there's a whole lot of wisdom, knowledge that's embedded deep inside of us. And the way that Betsy talks about it that's so exciting is she said, you know, when you're in a shower and all of a sudden you'll get an aha and you know it's right.
Yes.
So that's sort of the sweet spot that we're always looking for, which is how do you get that deep insight? How do you tap into that imagination? The Milky Way brain, and not just my Milky Way brain, not just my unconscious, but maybe there's this, what Jung would call collective unconscious. And can we tap into that? And what I'm learning, and there's nothing more dangerous than somebody who's only had a year of depth psychology. So at the end of year 2, I'll tell you more. But right now, I think that I have some beginning ideas from Dr. Carl Jung. He discovered that the unconscious, each of us, has an independent symbol-producing capacity. So when we dream, when we kind of see something, that is a part of us that speaks this language of the visual. It's almost a parallel internal language. And I don't want to talk too much about it because we do see it. And we call that, sometimes we call it the language of intuition and the language of imagination. And you know, I wrote this book many years ago on creativity in everyday life. We talk to people about how do you get this aha? How do you know what to write, what to draw? Well, all of these people had ways of accessing what we're now, thanks to Betsy, calling the Milky Way brain. But they could access this creative wellspring, and they had many techniques, often visual, that they would go to. They would imagine a visual picture before they'd write, before they'd sing, before they, whatever their creative outlet was, a visual would help them get to that point of action. So that's another thing that we like to say is that visuals help translate the Milky Way brain into action. So insight this is something else Betsy said, I think very profound. Insight is not just oh, I've thought about something. There's action embedded in it. It's like, I've got insight, now I can act on it. And those ideas, those creative ideas, often come to us in pictures.
You know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about what it's like for babies. They don't read, they don't write, and yet they communicate so wonderfully. They let you know when they're hungry, when they want to be carried. They express their needs very clearly. And both of us are mothers. Yeah. We know it's happened to us. We've had this communication which is visceral in our, and so we've had this way of communicating with other people which has nothing to do with words or symbols, and we managed to do that. So I really feel it's so fundamental to us as being human, and in a way, just like the telegraph. You know, the telegraph had to, okay, you can only send, you know, Morse code, certain very limited bandwidth messages. Today, the new bandwidth limitations that have restricted us to writing are just broken. We can do so much more. We can have videos, we can have audio, we can have communication about the complexity of systems where we show the systems in motion in ways that was never available to us when we had to write everything on paper and pencil. So the power of visual communication is just beginning to, and you're one of the leaders in pioneering this frontier.
Well, I think you've hit on two very important points. One is about the complexity, and that is the case right now. There's so much complexity. We're so cerebral. We have to, as you know, be agile and change and move. There is not time to document. So what's happening is that people are using visuals as a way to, we call, Bonnie and I, compressed communication. You can get a lot of information very quickly to people. As we know, people will look at the visual journals after a meeting and they'll remember because of that cognitive dual coding. They were there when that picture was made. They remember what they were thinking and what was happening in the room. And that is very, very powerful for people. So yes, I mean, you've got the complexity, and then that's the reason why I think this conversation is so important. Because yes, visuals are everywhere. There's YouTube, there's video, there's illustrations, there's cartoons, there's so much. And it's tempting, or it happens, that sometimes visuals are used in a more, I don't want to say careless, but maybe perfunctory way. Just somebody thinking, oh, we should throw in some clip art, or, and that's, it's always good to have some eye candy. But the more deep way of creating imagery that resonates, that captures, that holds, like, in a way, you know, you see an eye and the word imagination, that's going to stick with you because you've really conveyed more than you could with just the words. So that combination of words and images in a certain way is very resonant and powerful. So learning how to use visuals more intentionally, I think, will really help, especially the leaders who need to be conveying a lot of complexity, using the visuals in a way that is that shape of thought, that is our ancient language, rather than, you know, just being entertaining, which is also nice. But yeah, I think that's a movement now. And there's many leaders in that, Edward Tufte, David Sibbett, Bob Horn. We know a lot of these people who are really helping us to use visuals very intentionally and for the greater good.
So you're giving me a big aha. Which is wonderful, because I'm seeing this word intuition. And what I do know is that somebody who is a master craftsman no longer has to think step 1, step 2, step 3. They do it unconsciously. And when they look at something, their intuition tells them, is this right or is this wrong? You know, like Michelangelo, he said, the statue's in the stone.
Yeah.
But for us, we just see the stone. We don't have that intuition of a Michelangelo that sees the shape of the David in the stone. So what you're saying is that visuals can be a language that taps that powerful intuitive ability and can link separate people's intuition together in order to get a collective aha and insight that is in fact not available through our rational brain. Let me take this a little bit further. So Daniel Kahneman wrote an important book called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. And in that book, he talked about how we learn things through thinking slow. A baby learns how to smile, how to get food. We learn the alphabet. But then after a while, it moves into thinking fast because it becomes intuitive. When we're reading a book, we're no longer reading A, B, C. We're reading whole words. And then sometimes we're really getting the whole gist of it all in one. So what you're saying is that visual thinking is starting to allow us the quick connection between the thinking fast between people. Whereas up to now, science, journals, the way we've communicated has been through that thinking slow mode. But in fact, once we've got shared intuition, we can shift into thinking fast, and we can use pictures to help us get there where the words are slowing us down. Did I get that?
It's very well said and very astute, and I have not heard it phrased that way, but I think you're right, and it resonates with something that I just read about how experts categorize information. They might have a memory palace in their minds, but it is by the essence and the gestalt. It's not a lot of details put together, but it is the ability to see the whole of an idea, and that's how experts become expert, is, as you say, the details fall away. And then you're right that if you have many people who are sharing these images together, then you're stitching together not just information, but intuition and something at a meta level, a context. So they're creating a shared context that way. And I think the way you said that was very, very eloquent.
I want to pick up on something you said, which is the memory palace. Okay. Let's go into the story of the memory palace. I understand it this way. Maybe I remember it wrong. But there was a dinner party in Rome 2 millennia ago, and it collapsed. And the room that they were all in, a whole bunch of people. But one person escaped, but they couldn't recognize all the other people because their faces, they were destroyed by all the rubble. But they said, okay, who was here and where were they sitting? And it turned out he tapped his memory palace. He remembered who was sitting on my right, on my left, and all around the table. And that was really when I think humans got to realize, wow, our visual memory is so acute. We aren't consciously remembering that stuff. It's just there all the time. What a powerful instrument that we should use more effectively.
Yes. Absolutely, and I think in a way that's what these visuals are. We created this one just for this wonderful conversation today. And then I think about, like, why did this happen? Why did we do a spiral? Well, spirals are about learning. So when we think back about our conversation, we'll probably think back that here are these people with all these different ideas. Yeah. And then as we talk about visuals, we're opening and expanding. So this is kind of a memory palace for us too. Yes. So we in the Egyptian term, it would be a cartouche, and that's a holder for information. And ideally, that's what we're doing in these large visuals, is we're creating a container that resonates with the ideas inside. So cognitively, they'll be associated, and that is our own little memory palace for storing a lot of information. Highly visual people will actually do that.
Okay, now, I know one thing that both of us share is that we both love dancing.
Yes, we do.
So, Eileen, people have called you an information dancer. What's that all about?
Well, it's my favorite term for the job, but this is this part here. In the mural, we had to have the dancers. Somebody's catching a star from the Milky Way brain. So this idea is that our bodies know how to draw, and that when we think we're doing visual communication, but it's really kinetic communication when it's at this scale, read visually. So let's do an experiment.
Okay.
Okay, so if I were to say to you, the flow of the conversation's going well, show me a flow, what would you do? Exactly, like a hula or the mudras, hand movements, and that's what it would be. Everybody knows that's flow. Let's think of another one. What if you're really excited and happy? Yay, victory, what would you do?
Well, I'm thinking of my husband's happy engineer dance, which goes like this.
It's always the hands, right? And they're going up. So we have people up like this. You know that they're, well, so yes, they're happy, they're well. So what if you were very upset, you had to make a big point? What would you do? There would be something sharp.
Yeah.
So we have sharp movements on it. We don't have any here, but everybody would know that. A big check or an arrow, something sharp. So really what I like to think of this as is talking with our hands and leaving a mark. So when I say to people, anybody can do this, they really can if they stop thinking, because our bodies will automatically speak this language of shape.
Wow.
Very powerful. And children do it all the time. In fact, we train people to do this. We actually have them do the hokey pokey. It's really very physical. Now, how does that affect a boardroom? I mean, as you know, I sit with the top leaders of many organizations, and we don't dance really in the room all the time, not often. But the reason that I think this kinetic piece works is that it taps into our emotions. Yes. I think that the feelings that we have are expressed physically often, right? And if I'm in the room and it's, people are sitting around a board table and I'm capturing things in something like this, it does tap into and capture and express some of the emotion or the feelings. If people are not cohesive or if they are coming together, you'll see that on the mural. So I think that there is that physicality is actually a connection to our humanness. Wow. And our emotions.
So this is reminding me of a meeting that we were just at a couple of weeks ago, and I was facilitating a table, and the table was covered with paper.
Oh, yes.
And we were asking people to introduce themselves, and they were asked to draw a spider diagram with you in the center and who you're connected to, your family, your community, your college, or whatever. And then we went round and said, tell us about yourself, and show the little picture. And then she said, I find myself always in meetings and we never stand up. That's why I was thinking about it. And anyway, I said, okay, everyone, stop. And there was like 10 people around the table. I said, stand up. And then we did a yoga exercise. But then after we stood up, we stayed up. And we put our little spider diagrams and we put it on the table. And then we started to draw lines between them so that we could see our connections. Yeah. And we were the only table that started to do this. Now it turns out 2 weeks later, our table is more connected and there's more phone calls between us. Yes.
Wow.
That the physical connection of moving around and drawing those lines and saying, oh, wow, you have a pet named, Prince. Those things mattered in a kind of way that I wouldn't have predicted.
I'm so glad you told me that, because that's part of my research is what happens when we can engage people in doing their own visuals. Of course, it's great to be in there kind of channeling the room and imagining, because I was a news reporter for so many years. The job is to be the observer and try to get the objective view, even if it's a visual. But what if people were each sharing their subjective views? And that's the research I'm doing next. So you've already got some data for me, it sounds like.
Yeah, because we were just comparing notes on what was happening with there are several tables, and the response of the other people's tables wasn't as strong as the ones where we all got up and we started all drawing lines between our connections.
That's my theory, that it really will engage people more deeply if we can get them to, if we can draw them out literally.
So let's shift the discussion to, I've just described something where the visuals really made a difference in a practical aspect where we were trying to engage people to work on a project together. How practically can people use these visuals? What ways have you seen?
Well, the most frequent is a vision statement where you're trying to get a group of people aligned behind where they're going to go next. And it has to be something big and out of reach so that there's a little bit of an enchantment and excitement when they have a visual picture, a one-page picture of here's where we're going and the steps to get there. That's one way that we use it. Another way is when people are just sharing ideas, like we talk about the ideation phase, and we might have the way out ideas way out there in the Milky Way, and then the grounded ideas on the ground. So we're actually showing how people's ideas fit together. But let's go further with this now, and let's think about organizations. You don't have an expert or a professional, and you don't need one. You put this up on in the wall and have people sort of almost like graffiti. You know, what are you thinking? What fits together? Have people play with that. And in families and with children, to let them come and do their information dancing, and so they can see their ideas shown, and mom and dad can put their ideas up. Like you said about the spider diagram, people start seeing their ideas connected. The power of it is that we're all kind of in our heads a lot of times, these big separate heads with these little connections between them. The visuals really open that up. And instead of looking at each other, people begin looking at their ideas together and how they fit together. So there are many practical ways to use this, both ourselves in an informal way and in a highly formal way. If we create, for example, a new vision or a strategy for a company, and everybody then has it on their screen, or they have a poster, everybody's literally on the same page.
On the same page.
On the same page.
Wow. So it's very, very powerful, this visual language that you've introduced us to. Could you sum it up for us, for what we've covered today?
Well, sure. Yes, and everybody has his or her own visual language. So today we talked about what I think are three of the main tools and places of power for visuals, which you helped explain so beautifully. I appreciate that so much. One is in our personal intuition, tapping into the imagination so we can get that aha, really tap into the wellspring of our own creativity. Just drawing pictures, see what comes out of that. Start with the picture instead of the word. The other is then connecting with other people by all putting our ideas together, having somebody do that or doing it together. And then finally,
the dancing.
The dancing.
And on that note, we'll finish. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. That was so fun. Yeah. Wow. What a great conversation.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Maylin.
Oh, the dancing. I didn't get a chance to do my shimmy.
It's not too late, is it? Oh, are we done?
Yeah. So it's terrific. Okay.